Right, all yours, Mike.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, I am going to continue my sharing of my journey, particularly to do with the dimensional stuff and my experiences along the line of those dimensional things, so that I can just follow the story through really until I bring it up to date, pretty much. So if you're not feeling that, I'm sure you're going to. These things and sharing these things opens up a realm which does challenge us. It challenges our mindsets. You know, I'm writing a book at the minute, and the chapter I'm on is the hoodwinking of history, and so I'm doing my own research to see what in history is the truth and what actually has an agenda behind it. And I would go further than saying it's just the religious spirit or the Pharisaical spirit. There's also the political spirit, because Jesus warned of the spirit of Herod and the Pharisees. And that represents the religious and political spirit, which actually are the pawns of a Luciferian agenda, which is the Babel agenda. Let's make a name for ourselves. Let's have one world system under Lucifer. But obviously, if most people knew that that was the agenda, they would reject that agenda, obviously. But so it's a hidden agenda where, you know, if you read the Screw Tape letters and you look at C.S. Lewis stuff, you realize that obviously the agenda that's there is being hidden, and we need to become aware that there are agendas that have been there which are hidden from the history books. And what's behind history, and you know, the Russian Revolution, all of that stuff, I totally believe that there is an agenda, and we need to, as the sons of God, overcome that agenda. I'm not fearful that that agenda is ever going to be fulfilled, but it's very, very difficult to engage creation when most people are in deception. And the real deception, it rooted is in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the more people are deceived, the less truth they can engage, and the less light gets revealed, and things remain in darkness. Now, you know, Isaiah 60, arise, shine, your light has come, and all of that, you know, and I believe in one sense, biblically, that's been fulfilled, but we are the light of the world, and we continue to be the light of the world, and we do need to arise and shine as sons and engage creation. And it does say that there is deep darkness covering the earth. Now, my experience in engaging the earth shield and engaging with the atmosphere of the earth around the world, that is true. That there are beings that are actually operating in the realms of the atmosphere of the earth, that are engaging with what's going on the earth, and all of the control systems that are behind that, you know, the systems which are controlling the finance and the energy and all of those things, and pharma and all of that. I do believe there is an agenda behind it. Now, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist. I'm not really interested in that. But I do know that some conspiracies hide the truth, and some conspiracies are lies that keep the truth from being shown. And some of that stuff is designed that we won't know what the truth is, because there's so much misinformation, you don't know what the actual information is. I would say if you're concerned about any of the things that are being shared, go back to the Father or go to Jesus, the truth, and ask him with an open heart and an open mind, and ask him to fact check the things that you're looking at. And I've done that with many different things where I was concerned, is this true? What's true? I knew in my own spirit that I was resonating with something, but it was so contradictory to what the history books say that it made me question what I was looking at and what I felt the Father was talking to me about, actually. And in the end, the Father says, the best fact checker is Jesus, the truth. So anytime I have a doubt or I'm concerned that what is true in this, and often there's a mixture, and often some things are true and some things are not true, and there's a twisting of the truth within a lot of media and a lot of history and a lot of things. Therefore, it's so hard to discern. the more time you spend with the truth, the easier it is to discern the truth and to find the frequency of truth on something. So I can read a book from a new age guru, and I could read it and I could find truth in it. But I would also find a whole lot of lies and a whole lot of deception and a whole lot of twisting of truth. So it wouldn't be my idea to go and read a new age guru book to get truth, because I can go to Jesus and get the same truth. I don't have to read mystical books to find the mystery, because I engage the mystery to find the truth. So for me, I don't need to do an awful lot of research about some things, because I've already engaged the truth. But when it comes to writing about the hoodwinking of history, you really do need to have some sense of, well, how did that happen? And what was the agenda all the way through history of empire and empirism and government and all of the things that we've seen? And one government come to the end and another one coming to the fore. I mean, that is part of the agenda for humanism. Humanism is a problem because that has come out of our desire to be independent of God and prove ourselves as God. You know, that's what humanism is. It's its own God. So engage the truth. If you're concerned, go back with an open heart and an open mind, and be willing to ask the Father, can you reveal to me what is true and what isn't true, so that I need to know at this point in time. And sometimes we just don't need to know at this moment. But when we do, and when we're concerned, allow him to remove the veils and the scales up over our eyes so that we can actually see the truth. And a lot of the times that's made me feel uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable because it challenged what I thought I knew and what I've been taught, to a degree that I became double-minded, and then I started to waver. Is this true? Is this not true? And that's when I decided, look, I need to take everything back to the truth, and I need to discern what is and what isn't in this. And everything's a mixture. That's why it's so hard to understand, because everything's a mixture. If it was all one black or white, then, and I know you could say, well, there's right and there's wrong, there is black and white, but actually it's been made to appear gray, and shades of gray, which make it harder to see what is the truth and what isn't. So, you know, please, I just encourage you to build your relationship with God to such a degree of intimacy and union that you begin to know his heart, and be open for the deconstruction process, because there is a lot of deconstruction that all of us really, really need. And it does feel like our head is exploding sometimes as we go through it. So as we mature or ascend higher, we will discover that we have creative abilities far above what we could have imagined. And I think those creative abilities are going to be released so that we can do the things on the earth of establishing heaven on earth in a way which is not confined to using technology necessarily, or even making something out of something else. You know, I mean, I love woodworking. Okay. I mean, in lockdown, I've really spent time, you know, for my own self, which is what Lindy suggested it's good to do, you know, and I did, and I started making things and I started being creative. And then I started to feel guilty about using wood because I was engaging creation one day, and I felt the forest and the rainforests that are being, you know, absolutely stripped from the earth, like the Amazon, because people's desire for wood or create land for farming. And I suddenly started to feel somewhat guilty about, oh, I'm using wood and they're trees, and I'm actually promoting the destruction of trees and everything else. And I was asking God, well, what would have happened if Adam had not fallen? Would we still have been living in a garden without any houses or without any sort of things which are structures? And he said to me, well, what have you experienced in heaven, in the realms of heaven? And well, I've experienced courtrooms and throne rooms and thrones. He said, well, what do you think that was made out of? And I sort of thought, well, light. And he said, well, why don't you think you can create things out of light? Why do you need to destroy something to create something? So actually, why shouldn't we create something with the appearance of wood, which doesn't mean we have to destroy trees? You know, let's say we're going to establish some embassies of heaven on earth, which is, you know, cities of refuge, different names for them, you know, hubs, things that Indy said she's going to talk to us about how do we establish cities of restoration on the earth. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about what would it be like, and this was a few years ago before any pandemics or anything like that, what would it be like if there was an incurable disease that spread around the earth, and that there were pockets of people who were living in heaven on earth and not subject to those diseases and were living in full health? And what would happen is everybody who was dying would want to know why we were living in health and would want to come and live with us in cities of restoration or cities of refuge. And they would be refuge from the things that are ravaging the earth. And we would have to then say, okay, there's 5,000 of us living in this little area, and 100,000 people turn up who want to be living in wholeness and health. What would we do? How would we house them? How would we have 100,000 houses for people? And I was thinking about, well, how would we do that? Should we get ready now? And God said, well, why don't you just call them into being and see them created? Why do you think you need to make them out of bricks or out of wood or out of any other substance? Because that's not what I created it out of. I chose through my intention and through my words to speak it into being, to call things that be not as if they are. So why shouldn't we think of, well, here's 100,000 houses. I am going to choose to create that. That's a reality that I can choose. But I believe we need to start having our imagination expanded, our consciousness expanded, so we don't choose the easy option or the option of humanism, which is, well, let's cut down some more trees, or let's dig up some more stuff that we can make concrete out of, or whatever else, and actually start to embrace a different way of being creative and not limit ourselves to what we've seen in the past. And I do believe, and what the Father showed me was that, yes, we would not have been living purely in a garden, but we would have been living in such creative, beautiful places that we created, that it will go way beyond what we could ever imagine in architecture that we can make with the materials that we have right now. You know, and I love architecture. I love what we have done. You know, I find it, you know, very interesting to see the creativity that's built into people. I just don't like the way we've done it in asset stripping the planet to do it. And I think there are other solutions that we will find, and creative abilities that go way beyond where we currently are. And I think we are maturing to be able to do some of that. So we have the ability to live multidimensionally, not just travel to the dimensions. That is something we're learning. 6th of April this year, in my engagements, the Father said, son, keep abiding in the light of our glory and be transformed by the love and truth that you're bathed in. And I like that term. I am bathed in the light of love and truth. I am soaking in it. I am being immersed in it. I am cocooned in it. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. Come closer and be immersed and absorbed into us, to feel what we feel, know what we know, so you can become who we made you to be. Now, this was an invitation, and I, of course, accepted that invitation. So I stepped closer until I could no longer see what I was looking at, and then I entered into a whole other level of being, somewhere between being one with and no longer being. And this is very difficult for me to describe. I went into the Father, I went into God, let's say Father, Son, and Spirit. I went into them, and I was absorbed into them to such a degree of union that I'd never ever experienced before. And that was the point. It was such a weird experience. None of the words that I can express really are adequate, but it was a deeply, deeply emotional experience. And I was in an expanded and a diminished state, because I was less than myself, but more than myself. And then it was like finding yourself and losing yourself simultaneously, being everything and being nothing, being in oneness and yet still being distinct, and yet being part of everything. It was such a deeply moving experience, but it again connected me to the Father's heart and to creation in a new level. I felt like I was less than myself, more than myself, but still myself, but in an altered state or altered reality state of self. Because I still think most of, or some of our self is still connected to being brought up in living in the state of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because most of the world is under that, and we've been brought up, and everything we've been taught, most of that has come through that tree knowledge. It doesn't come through the tree of life. And I think as you begin to engage the tree of life, it begins to change your actual state of being, and then self is not independent. If soon as you attach a word to self, it becomes an issue. Self-esteem. Well, where does my esteem come from? Self. All of those words attaches to self, I believe, have come out of the wrong tree knowledge. So I don't think of myself. I think of me in union with God. And of course I am me, and he created me to be me, but never to be independent of him. And when Adam was walking in the garden with the Father, there was a union that Adam was unaware of self, independently of God. And it was only when he chose to eat of the fruit, figuratively, of what they did, that then he became self-aware. And if we were only aware of ourself through the lens of the Spirit and the interaction that we have with God, we would see ourselves very differently. And so this experience began to expand my sort of awareness of self, but in union, and change other areas of self which are not in union. So many experiences are first weird. You know, that's been my experience. Everything was weird to start with, but the more I engaged it, the more familiar and explainable they become. So the first time I stepped into this was like so beyond. It was difficult to fathom it, and I just relaxed and allowed it to happen. But I've been back, and the more I've been back, the more it becomes something I can begin to relate to in a different way. Son, you are not in perichoresis, you are perichoresis. Now, perichoresis is the Greek word which is for the circle of conversation. People somewhat say the circle of the dance, but actually I don't think that was the original meaning. Because when I've engaged with God, Father, Son, and Spirit, within that perichoresis in the past, it's been like being included in a conversation. Now, it is a joyful conversation, and it could be a conversation that is a dance, no problem, but there's a conversation. There is a communion, a fellowship that takes place there that I have so enjoyed being in, within that loving place. But he said, son, you're not in perichoresis, you are perichoresis. Now, I think that relates to me, Father, Son, and Spirit within me, and me, spirit, soul, and body, being in one and in union. You are not tied in to a Trinitarian knot, but have been that knot. And there's a sense where there's a reconnection to who I was before I came here that brings an awareness of being within him. Abandon your senses, stop trying to understand this state and just be, and allow the being to enlighten you. And I've had to learn how to do that, because my tendency is I want to understand. I want to figure this out. I want to understand it so I can tell other people about it so they can understand it and they can experience it. But when you have encounters like this of intimacy, it's best not to try and figure it out at the time. And I've actually learned not even to try and figure it out afterwards, but allow the revelation to be revealed. I think Lindy was talking about that this morning when she was basically saying, look, you know, when you receive something in the right time, it will be unveiled. And I just needed to experience it. Being in this state of being or state of enlightenment will begin to prepare you to go beyond again, where there's so much more. And I realized that there is so much more. States of being are so much more important than striving in the doing. And the humanistic perspective is to strive to do, because in striving to do, you create your own self-identity. Now, we know that that is never going to satisfy. That is why those people who are billionaires and those people who are very successful, very rarely are they content. They're driven, and they're driven for more and more, because it will never satisfy. Only being in union with the creator, if you like, and with the creation can truly bring that state of being. And that real contentment, satisfaction, just this is how it should have been. This is how it should be. And you get to feel that in the light of his presence. So I was in such a state of being that everything seemed to stop. It was like as if there were no motion, no movement, and it was just all was as it was. This is how it should be. Even if it was, for that time, that enables to me to have a different perspective to when I look at the world, when I look at those things around my life. There was no should be, could be, can be, maybe, just being. In an enlightened state of just being incorporated, just being one, in union, oneness, beyond anything I'd really ever experienced before. So there was no individual thought, there was no thought of doing. As I was, for the first time, being, no past, no present, no future, just now. There was a coherence of being. It was like a lucid, altered state where I was aware, but I couldn't quite grid the awareness. But it was such a beautiful place. So, and feel everything as it always was, as time has no existence here within I am that I am, as we are, and now you are part of that we. And I think that's really where, now there's a big thing out of the minute about oneness and, well, we're God, and there are people saying, well, I'm God, and the reality is I am not God, but I am a son of God. And therefore Jesus said, you're gods. So there's a sense where we really have to accept that the nature of sonship will bring us into a state of being which will totally illuminate and reveal what it means to be a son of God and why Jesus could say you are gods. But I am not God, and you are not God. And those people who say that they are God are not. Now, I do believe that there is a consciousness that we call the mind of Christ, that we all can connect to, that can bring us into a state of union, not just with him, but with each other, that will illuminate us to be able to operate at a different level and different scale of being. But I know that I am not God. And, I think it becomes delusional when we get to that point where we actually think, well, we were the one who created everything. No, I know I didn't, without a doubt. But there is such a degree of intimacy which will bring us to that point where we truly know who we really are within that. In this enlightened state of being, there could be no thoughts or imaginations of anything different, as it felt like everything is always perfected. Now, generally, when I engage something and get God's intention, I immediately compare it with what it isn't like here, so that I want to see what's here aligned to what I'm experiencing in intention. But in this, there was no feelings like that. I just was so in that place. So it was such a wonderful place to be. Son, abide here, and you will be able to be a restorational being within the eternal fabric of the creation, of a creation that still needs to become. Let this continual state inspire, empower, and motivate your being within the created dimensions, just as it does with us. Be in the transcendent and the immanent state simultaneously, and converge your enlightened state of reality to help restore the cracked and fractured reality you live in. And, some of this stuff sounds really weird and new agey. I would, not that I've ever really looked at new age stuff, but it sounds that way from what people have said, but I'm just trying to express something which is almost inexpressible. When Paul went into the realms of heaven, he said there were things that are inexpressible. And I'm trying to use words, and he was trying to use words that were first century words. I'm trying to use words which are 21st century words, and I'm still struggling to really get over what I'm trying to say, but it's best experienced. This state of enlightenment is the only state of being that can see through the delusional matrix that most of our children are trapped in. And that's why we need to be aware of the deceptions that may be all around our existence that we've just believed without really knowing. live loved in transcendent immanence, and love living in restoration reality, and live loving kindness. And that's what I can boil down to that state of being is. Only the revealing of enlightened sons can free creation from its bondage to the unreal state of delusional corruption. I began to see visions or thoughts that made some sense of what I was experiencing. And the first thing I saw was like creation as a metaphorical clock with the movement stuck as it was straining to make the next tick, having the appearance that it was moving, but in fact, it was just repeating the same moment. And that actually is the problem. Humanism will get us repeating the same thing to try and solve the problems and actually just reinforcing them. And so it's aware, that's where we're stuck. That's where humanity is stuck. Thinking we're moving, but in actual fact, it is only an illusion. And it felt like our kitchen clock, actually, when the battery's running low, because it's a battery clock, and it starts to tick, but threatens to move, but falls back in a perpetual time loop. And there are perpetual time loops that are designed to keep us in deception. In some of our engagements, we've seen some of those time loops, and we've seen how those have affected how we're relating to creation. This is a continual state of hope deferred, making the heart of humanity sick, hopelessly trapped in a repeated matrix moment. And I think there is a matrix that the world is living in, which is not the truth. It may be facts, but that is not the truth. And we need to help the whole of creation out of those repeated moments, being trapped. Enlightenment can see beyond into what is, so creation can be set free to become what it already is within the transcendent state of I am. So we've got to bring the eternal now into the present and manifest it, so that when we are now history makers, what we're making in history is actually how God intended it to be rather than what it is. This state converges the transcendent and the immanent into a balanced, unified whole. Oneness. So all this did feel like some sort of cosmic psychedelic trip. Not that I've ever been on one. I've never taken a drug in my life. So I wouldn't know what LSD, but it sounds a little bit like what some people say LSD is like, or magic mushrooms or whatever else. And it was really like, whoa, seeing all sorts of things which were quite challenging. But I know it's changed me, because when I opened my eyes from that experience and I looked, and this was in the spring in April, and I looked outside through the window, because I've got a big picture window that I look into, it looked different. It felt like the colors were changed, and it was filled with hopeful expectation. Like it doesn't have to be like this. We don't have to be stuck. Mankind or humanity does not need to be stuck. Mankind can ascend into sonship, but the sons of God have to lead the way and be the light of love that demonstrates that to the world that is in darkness. You know, it may feel like it's in the light and may feel that we've advanced so much technologically, but actually it really still is in darkness compared to the light of truth and the light of love, that actually it's like when you're in face to face with the light, with the truth. Everything was beginning to burst into life after a long winter, and it felt like creation has been in a long winter. You know, and if you know the Narnia stories, it's like, you know, winter without ever being Christmas. That's one of the statements that is made, you know, which was what the world was like under the rulership of the being that was controlling that world. And obviously Aslan came into the picture to deal with it. But we are of the order of Melchizedek as the sons of God, governmentally, and our responsibility is to bring this creation out of a long winter into a new regenerated spring experience. So I felt like I was no longer looking through a glass darkly, but it was now illuminated like never before. And I'd gone beyond looking into the face of God to being in the face, the Father's face, be in that, absorbed into it. April 7th, I engaged in the realm of light again, in that perfection, looked into the Father's face and directly into his eyes, where I was drawn closer, and deeper until I was heart to heart. This time I was not totally absorbed, and I knew I was there, but I was connected, still connected. I began to feel waves of emotion, and each wave a different feeling and frequency, but all the emotions had a similar harmonic characteristic. There was something about this which was harmonious, something which was beautiful, wonderful, and I kept feeling it, and it was an intensely emotional experience. I was familiar with those emotions because I abide and dwell in them, as they are comfortingly constant and consistent when you're in the presence of God. They're not as consistent when we step out of that presence, which is why we need to abide there and live here from there. Live here from what we experience and what we're dwelling in that place of love and joy and peace and rest and grace and mercy. So all those emotions were directed at me, touching me deeply, making me feel completely secure, safe. And I knew I would never be let down or disappointed from that place. Now, I am aware that we always have potential to be let down and disappointed by people in this realm. And therefore, we need to live in that realm so that those letdowns and disappointments do not completely mess us up, because they can if they create hope deferred and our heart gets sick, and then we end up getting cynical and we end up getting skeptical and we end up getting in unbelief because something bad's happened to us. Lots of bad things have happened to me in my life. You know, lots of things. People have betrayed me. People have stabbed me in the back. People have done things which, you know, would I have rather they didn't do that? Absolutely. Has that affected how much I know God loves me? No. And has it made me question, God, why did you let that happen to me? No. Because I know he's going to bring good out of that situation if I respond the way he responds. And that is unconditional love and forgiveness. Irrespective of who's done what, that must be my first reaction. And that's why I was feeling these emotions, because they were empowering me to feel what God feels, because people have rejected him, and because there's been a rebellion, a cosmic rebellion, and because all of these dimensions, or lots of these dimensions, are fallen dimensions. How does that make God feel? Well, in a sense, in transcendence, it's all now, so it's all good. But in the immanence of living in every moment with that, he experiences what we do and he empathizes fully. So this began, I think, just to prepare me for some emotional experiences which are coming. And I know that I could trust and can trust God, the Father, implicitly. I felt cocooned in his loving kindness, his faithfulness, and his dependability. Because sometimes storms of life come and hit us, and we have to live within that position of loving kindness, faithfulness, and dependability on him. I trust him, even though the world sometimes doesn't make sense. How people treat each other doesn't make any sense when you can see what God is like. But that, for me, means I can live in that place of love, even when I'm not being loved necessarily from an earthly perspective. Son, we are unconditional love, limitless grace, triumphant mercy, joy unspeakable, pure peace. So rest in being secure in the experience that gives you true knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and prudence. Now, those are concepts, but they're also beings. And I've engaged with each of those beings, or four of those beings, because they've come as a four and come around me and created a window for me to stand in of experiencing knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and prudence. We are all that you need, yet you cannot truly be without others to be in union with, just as we are perichoresis, so you are one body. So these experiences can make us independent. Now, I don't want to be independent, although I know I can live independently if necessary. I don't want to be independent, and I want to be in a sense of oneness with others. That's why it's a body. We all have need of each other. We need each other relationally. We need each other functionally to actually be fulfilling God's purpose, without a doubt. So I remembered in an encounter that I had in a government ascension where I engaged in the light of the Father and experienced mercy. And sometimes something triggers a memory and I think, oh yeah, that was what that was about. So I felt the overwhelming need for mercy within the children of God. I started to feel people's need for mercy. where they were under condemnation, guilt, where their whole lives were messed up. I just felt mercy, mercy, mercy. I felt for the earth. The earth needs mercy. The earth is under tension. The earth is in bondage to decay and corruption. And then the dimensions. And of course, I sense, I felt it, but I felt inadequate, really. And what it felt like, what I used to do is I would go and get filled up with mercy and go and release mercy. And it would be like, I just can't contain enough mercy to deal with all of these people crying out for mercy, and what I'm feeling in the earth and the dimensions. I'm not big enough. And that's when really I felt that the Father said, look, if you dwell here, you can be a conduit. You don't have to be a container, because your container will never be enough. But if you're a conduit, there's a flow. But it felt like I'm just a straw when there needs to be a huge tunnel flowing with mercy. That's what I was feeling. I was feeling everything needs mercy. But I know mercy is triumphant, and I know there is an unending flow of mercy from God and from his heart. And that's why we need each other to come together, because the Father said many straws in union could provide the flow of endless mercy needed to overcome the loss, isolation, despair, hopefulness that is felt, that I've connected to in creation. Son, only hearts and minds in union with us will be able to receive and release all that you have felt to that which is lost and disconnected and disharmony, which is why I really want more and more of us to be able to connect this way. All the emotions I felt as waves and frequencies were now like a song. And this was, again, an amazing thing. It had gone from I'm feeling waves of emotion to this is producing a song. There is something where the frequencies are now connectable to in a different way. Each emotion was like a musical note created to be together as a symphony of emotions. I felt and listened to the intensity of the music of the spheres. And that's what the Father said to me. This is a music of the spheres, all of the spheres of creation, producing a song that was designed to be orchestrated within the Father's heart. And immediately I detected the familiar frequencies of the oracles of the Father's heart. So I began to connect with things I've connected to before, but this time as a song, as an orchestrated symphony. So I began to feel the full gamut of the emotions, the passion, the burning desire, the intense unspeakable joy, the triumphant mercy, the limitless grace, the overwhelming unconditional love, deep compassion, pure peace, union, blessing. It was like, wow, this is so amazing. And it was like a song. That the sounds being orchestrated were amazingly beautiful or inspiring, but they were alive with the energy of desire and intention that the Father created the song with. All creation was designed to produce this song when in union and harmony. The Son of all creation is waiting, longing, and groaning in anticipation for the sons of God, so they can join in by adding their unique sound and light to the orchestra. It's a metaphor, I guess, but it was such a beautiful experience, and the sound was just awesome. And I was captivated by the melody and the harmony as the emotions and the frequencies were composed to produce this joyous chorus of living light and sound. What I was experiencing was beyond any one expression, as it was multifaceted. There was so much levels and levels and levels to it. So I began to realize the complexity of the music I was feeling and how wonderful each part is. And it's only joined together in the wonderful union that restoration can fully be manifested. If there's something missing, the song is going to be incomplete. That's why all things need to be restored. Otherwise, the song can't be complete, because every part of creation that God made is part of this song, is part of the orchestra, if you like, that will never be complete unless everything's restored, which is why I'm so passionate for the restoration of all things. As amazing as the unconditional love, limitless grace, triumphant mercy are individually, when together in union, they're unstoppable, immovable, omnipotent. There is just such a power in that union of that government of those things, of the real nature and essence and character of God himself. Son, now you see and know the power of union and why it's so necessary for the restoration of all things back to our original intention and beyond. I believe these type of encounters are there for all of us to experience in unique ways. I'm not saying you'll experience it the same way I experience it, or the same way Lindy does, or Jonathan, or Nancy, but you will have your own experiences crafted for you that are designed to engage your spirit, soul, and body and being. 8th of April, Son, it's time to engage the Council of the Ages to align the circle of the deep with the ages and the High Chancellor's houses for the next season of awakening. Now, I'm familiar with all that terminology, and I have engaged in all those things. So for me, that this wasn't such a, like, what does all that mean? Because I know what it means, but it was a sign of it's time. So something needs to be done legislatively and governmentally for what's happening in this awakening, which I believe is happening, an awakening to love and consciousness, which is going to be a help in revealing what is true and what isn't true. These are the heavenly governmental wheels within wheels within wheels. And there are councils that operate in the realms of heaven that are designed to align things. And there's the circle of the deep, the external alignment of creational cosmology, if you like, with the ages, the ambassadors of the ages and the high chancellors, to bring about this agreement and alignment so things can actually begin to change. Before you engage the council, come walk with me, because I was going to engage the council having been told that, and we were immediately by the river of fire looking at the firestones. And we began to ascend the stones, pausing at each stone where all my previous encounters with the firestones were replayed to me. It was a sort of recapitulation of everything I had previously been. Now, I think I'd been there at this point, maybe 8 or 9 times significantly. And therefore, every one of those things all came back. And this was such an overwhelming experience. It's like the stone. The very first time I saw these stones, which are like steps, big steps, I saw the fabric of their being filled with grace, filled with divine enabling power, filled at a subatomic level. And I could see it swirling, energized. And when I stepped onto it initially, the very first time in 2008, in actual fact, the first time I really engaged this was 2008. It took me 2 years to get back to it in 2010, or to other experiences, but it was such a life-changing experience. And now all of my encounters on that first step, which was love, were replayed to me, or I experienced them over again, but all layered at once, which was rather overwhelming, but powerful. So the love that I've experienced in different ways and in different dimensions drew me into a state of deep rest until a new experience of love began to touch my whole being. Unconditional love in its very essence and nature began to captivate my heart and awaken my senses to another level of God's being and my identity. This was different from what I normally experience in the physical realm. And it's far from, which is far from unconditional love. Normally what we get here is we can experience love from each other, but it's just not the same as God's love. And it never will be, in the sense of, because it isn't God. But ultimately, the more we become one in God, the more we are able to love unconditionally, I believe. So I was transfixed, as if being in a cocoon, cocooned in a new material with deeper emotions for diversity of creation. And it was like, I'm finding it hard to express this, and I can even feel what I felt right now, which would be quite discombobulating if I allow it to overcome me. So the fiery nature of this emotion was the embodiment of the desire for the restoration of creation, but specially directed towards the dimensions. And this was what I was experiencing at that moment. The love that God has for the dimensions was empowering and inspiring me. After what seemed like an age, I began to transform. And again, I think this was like a transfiguration. The heat that I was feeling, and this was a deeply hot place, started to break the bonds of my being and allowing for transfiguration and spaghettification. And again, I started to just become something in a different altered state. I began to move. I was twisting, turning within this cocoon until it began to split open, and I started to emerge from the fire transformed. And the Father said, son, the next age of mankind's ascension is being catalyzed by the awakening of consciousness to unconditional love. Now, I would say most people do have no experience of unconditional love. Certainly those who are not engaged with the Father, I don't believe they can experience unconditional love without experiencing it from the Father. But even those who do engage with the Father, because of all this religious stuff, the religious spirit stuff, all of these Pharisaical laws, the coming under old covenant condemnation, mediatorial stuff, you know, the way the religious systems and the institutional systems are arranged, they're mediatorial, and they don't allow you to experience unconditional love. It always is conditional. It will seem to be a restriction when this begins to occur globally, but it's just a place of transformation before humanity emerges metamorphosed again as mankind. So I take from this that there are experiences coming which may feel like we're being restricted, but actually God has a bigger purpose for resetting and realignment and transfiguration and transformation within them. Now, I'm not going to postulate what those things might be, and I think it's for all of us to relate to that in our own way. But I think don't assume that things on the surface that seem to be a restriction, because for the caterpillar to be in a chrysalis, and for what happens within that chrysalis when they literally putrefy, and then the triggers within the DNA of the caterpillar trigger the emergence of a butterfly, would not be something I would think that the caterpillar was very keen on in the beginning. You know, and even so, sometimes the things that happen and our experiences feel like they could be restrictions. It's like, you know, Lindy talked today about not being able to see anything for a period. Now, it's like, well, why would the Father do that? Well, because he knows what he's doing. And sometimes we need to be restricted so we stop struggling and allow the Father to do what he wants to do. And I believe this is coming on humanity, not just individuals. I think some things are going to happen which create a consciousness and an awareness of transfiguration. You know, I'm not going to say any more because I don't know anymore, to be honest. But when fully emerged, I became aware that my external appearance was the same, but my consciousness had expanded, and I could see different wavelengths of light, and I could hear greater frequencies of sound physically. And I felt like I could look intently at something and see its appearance in a different way. Now, I can turn it on and off, fortunately, because it can be confusing when you're looking at stuff and you're seeing colors and all sorts of stuff around it. But I believe that all of us were created with the ability to engage wavelengths of light and sound, which are way beyond our physical ear's ability to pick up audio, electric impulses, and our eyes ability, because we can't see ultraviolet or infrared ends of the scale, or microwaves or gamma waves or any other waves. But actually, I believe that we were created to be able to connect up to creation in that way, and I think it's going to be restored. So I also felt that my internal being had changed. I'm not sure if this was physical or just another state of being, but things felt different. That's all I can say. So we continued to walk up each step, pausing at each one for a recapitulation of my previous encounters, and then experiencing another dimension of each until we reached the final 10th stone. We walked up the 9 stones, and then there was the 10th stone. Son, it's time to birth the next age stone and throne, because with every stone there is a throne. That's been my experience. With every encounter I've had in transformation around the Firestones, there's always been an elevation to a new throne, taking me to either a new place or a new level or a new dimension within the realms of heaven where a throne was, which gave me a new level of authority. So I stood there, but also I shifted my consciousness to engage the cradle of life, where I began to brood over everything I'd experienced, because I didn't just want this to be an experience. I wanted this to be the fullest that I could receive from this experience. So I began to brood over love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, the fruit of the Spirit, because that's what these first 9 experiences were. They were those levels of experience. Then the quantum moment began to stretch out before me, and I became the sound of many waters, eventually progressed through the chamber of destiny and the chamber of creation, where quantum lumens were activated. And I saw a new, an 11th stone begin to form as the photons began to collapse the wave function into a new reality. And then we stepped from the 10th stone, which was where I had been before, onto the 11th stone. And it was like I entered another reality. And immediately we were transported to a throne in a new realm of government, of heaven's government. And the Father then started to speak to me. Son, forerunners will begin to be seated here as they are transformed by this next age awareness of unconditional love and truth. The light was different, almost touchable. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation and possibility. This was a creative realm like nothing I'd been in before. I knew I was just representative, obviously, of mankind. I'm not saying other people haven't been there or haven't done these things. This was just my experience that I'm sharing. And I believe there are many forerunners being prepared for new expanded consciousness reality. Son, be still and know you are who you are becoming so you can be. And I don't think we can separate being still and knowing God from being still and knowing ourselves. I think they're so intimately entwined that you cannot do one without the other. 19th of April. Son, multidimensional reality is what our children were created for, to be like us and represent us to and through all creation. All of creation was designed to cooperate together in harmony to represent our manifold nature in an expression of who we are creatively. Our children were always intended to mature to be all that they could possibly be without limitations and restrictions within love. I became acutely aware of where I am in multidimensional realms and positions, sensing both from the Father's intentions and desires and from the portals of the Merkaba within the core of my being that I'm connected to all those dimensional realities in. This got activated and energized. I felt the energy of creative desire pulsating with potential for the restoration of all things and beyond, and the need for a full revelation of immortality. That's what struck me. We need to be immortal to fulfill what God intends us to be, because we were never supposed to die. Son, all of our children, along with all created things, were designed to be immortal so that they could enjoy limitless union without end. And I believe that that's what we're going to be restored to, limitless union without end. Being deceived into following their own path broke their union with creation, and that has created the illusion of separation that continues to keep our children from their true destiny. Ascension was always going to be a process of maturing, following the pathway of the tree of life to its conclusion. The deceptive illusion that keeps our children from their true identity and destiny, living in the futility of their own minds, must be exposed. And I think that's part of what's happening. We're beginning to expose the limitations and restrictions that we've been living under so we can be set free. And those are theological, those are historical, those are in so many different ways expressed, but we're being set free. The full potential of sonship must be realized for creation to be set free and restored to union and harmony. In that instant, a quantum moment expanded, and I remembered all my experiences of creational union and harmony. Now, these go back for 10, 12 years, And they were the spaghettifications, the time where I was just being, the time where I connected to creation, the time when I connected to elementals, to the thrones of the elementals, to all sorts of different things. And they all just came back into the fullness of my memory. The limitations of a single dimensional reality must be exposed by the global and cosmic shift and expansion of consciousness that is beginning to take place. We must not be defined to one dimension, because we will be one dimensional. And even though we could see this as a 3-dimensional place and a 4-dimension, if you add time in there, and other people will say there are other dimensions, we are still, I believe, living, if we're following the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in a one-dimensional reality and not a multi-dimensional one. This awakening to love and therefore true awareness of who we are is the goal of this season, so our children can begin to be set free from their bondage and deception. There will continue to be much opposition both within and without to the restoration of all things message, but you will begin to find and connect with those who are awakening to reality. And that's why we're here. That's why we've all been drawn to this event, because we're awakening to a reality. It might be like the Matrix. It might be like a splinter in our mind that's been there and has always been pricking us with, there's something more. This isn't all there is. There's got to be more than this. And we're beginning to find our family. And that family will then not exclude other people. We're not going to denominate and become this restoration of all things denomination. We're going to be inclusive, and we're going to reach out and seek for awakening to bring more and more people into the reality of their identity as sons of God, freeing them to be themselves, not putting into bondage to a system. This is about freedom. Son, continue to be at rest so your frequency can resonate across the dimensions. Your whole being has been coming into alignment with the oracles of our heart. Now you can be a dimensional oracle. Your frequency will be joined in union with others who are participation in the earth shield and becoming multidimensional. There are different councils being formed to facilitate the awakening within different parts of creation that are all part of a bigger strategy. Pursue the council with the guardians, the ambassadors, the chancellors, in union with those who you resonate with. So I engaged the cradle of life again, began to brood over the union and formation of this council, its impact on the restoration of the dimensions, creative thoughts and intentions of oneness, harmony. They all began to form a picture that was vibrating and living active desire and energy, such an energizing moment. So as I continued contemplating, I began to vibrate until I was ready to become the sound of many waters, the voice or oracle, to be able to activate the quantum lumens within the chamber of creation. And I was aware that I was not alone, that there were others who were part of that creative process, who were in such union of heart and mind, almost indistinguishable, that I knew that what I was doing, I was not alone. Even though I couldn't tell you who those others were, I knew I wasn't alone. So I released a handshaking frequency. Now, Lindy was talking about this morning about communing with people around the world, practicing, having that union and intuitively connecting. You know, we connect by Zoom, we connect by the internet, but we need to connect in the realm of the spirit so that we connect with a spiritual neural network. And so we practice this actually in our engagements sometimes. Like, okay, can we discern what we're doing and what we're saying without actually being there? And so we're practicing, you know, and we're having some fun doing it, and it's interesting. And I learned how to release a handshaking frequency. Now, handshaking protocols within computers is what enables two things to connect to one another. So I released this frequency to consciously able to connect with those who are in union, and I felt multiple energy signatures respond. And I open my heart every day in the Earth Shield. I open my heart for connection. I open my heart for communication. I open my heart for this awareness that I'm not alone, that we're in this together, that we're coming into union. And I believe we're going to get testimonies of where we are communing and fellowshipping, but not by technology, but in the spirit. And I think that's happened numerous times to me, usually at night when people tell me, oh, I met you the other night and you were dressed like this and you were doing this and you were saying this. And I'm saying, okay, tell me more, you know, because sometimes I can't remember. But then when they trigger, something they say triggers a memory, and then it's like, oh yeah. And I think there's going to be more consciousness about that, actual consciousness about that. Sun, release another blue light call, but now focus this towards the indigo end of the scale of frequencies to connect with those who are being awakened. Now, there are those who are called indigo children who are being born with abilities that are being unlocked from their DNA and from their consciousness, that they are savants and other immensely talented children, that I think is maybe just an indication that what God was saying is to release a frequency that is going to connect with those who are on this journey and who are ready to begin to connect and experience in that union. So I release the frequency like a beacon through my Merkaba portals dimensionally as waves of light carrying my desire and intention for union. So I'm expecting to begin to connect in union. And I think some of that union is not just with people, it's with the angelic realm. And I think that's why I'm experiencing so many angelic realm encounters, because groups of angels, usually in 3s or 4s, keep connecting with us when we're engaging, when we're activating, when we're ascending. And I think this is some of what this is about. We're connecting with those that are in this union of purpose. So I sense the energy of different people, dimensions of the earth, the cosmos, the elementals, angelic realms, heavenly realms, dimensions that were being engaged by the light call. And I open my heart to them all. Now, some people think, well, that's a bit dangerous, but I don't think so. Not when I'm engaged in this union with Father, Son, and Spirit in the way that we're all called to be in. I knew that I would need to be diligent, vigilant in my desire to connect. And this is a new blue light call, because I connected with this blue light thing years ago, that would need to be continually broadcast multidimensionally. And that is what I'm continuing to do. This is a continual process, and I'm very active in it. This would require focused intention and persistence. Sometimes you release an intention and you know it's done. And sometimes, you know, you just have to continually be intentional. And I think this was one of those occasions. 20th of April. Oops, I just pinged a nice sound with my watch. Sun, come with me as I've something to show you that you need to know about. So we began moving through the constellations again. This was this time the Father, beginning with the 12 known as the Mazzaroth. In each one, we stopped at each of the dimensional portals where there were guardians stationed. Now, this was another experience of the same thing. So I was a bit like, why are we doing this again? But there was a point to it. As we went beyond to the other constellations, there were many portals where there were guardians, but there were some that were not guarded. And I became intensely aware of them. I felt a sense of apprehension, impending danger, that these portals could be opened and that would create a problem. I know we have the Earth Shield, but I'm not saying the Earth Shield is necessarily powered up enough to stop every interference that is maybe being planned. So I remembered that, again, I'd been in this Pleiades dimension. I saw some of this. So I was aware of what happens when there's negative activity in interdimensional things. Sun, all the dimensions are accessible within the 12 constellations. Do not engage your realm, and well, they don't engage your realm unless the everlasting doors are opened, such as the West Gate. Now, we have gates within the realm of the everlasting doors that we have authority to open, but they can be opened illegitimately. Now, twice in history, modern history, and these were opened in ancient history a number of times for the Sumerians and other releasing of knowledge. But in modern history, they were opened twice. Once, I think, in 1917, 18. And I think that was also significant in what was going up in the upheavals of the world at that time. Second World War, beginning of the Communist Revolution and all that stuff. And it happened again in 1947, 46, 47, when another portal on that Western Gate was opened. And they used various ancient knowledge and incantations to do it. Now, I'm sort of exploring this a moment because I was involved with this. And in 2015, there was a Christian conference which was called, entitled openthewestern-gate.org was the website for it, in which there was a desire to open the Western Gate and for Christians to come into agreement to welcome through the Western Gate some things. And although some people realized that that was not such a wise thing to do, some people just bought into it because of the personality of the person who was involved in it. Now, I was given a mandate. This was the 28th of November, 2015. On the 7th of November, 2015, God spoke to me completely out of the blue and just said, some people are basically are seeking to open the gate for an incursion from another dimension. Make sure you assign Sentinel angels to guard the gate. Now, and there was a few other things attached to it, but so I did. I had no idea what was being planned, but I did what I was asked to do and I forgot about it. And then when all this stuff blew up about this conference and what had happened, and it did create a lot of issues around, the memory came back and thought, oh, this is what that was about. And then I did some research and asked the Father, has this been opened before? And he showed me. The 1947 opening by Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, who was this creator of Scientology and diakinetics. And Jack Parsons was a NASA rocket scientist, rocket fuel scientist. And they opened this gate. And subsequently, we had all the Roswell type stuff and all the other stuff, which was to do with, people being taken and traded. And there's a lot of trading stuff and a lot of trafficking stuff that happened after this. So most of the activity between the dimensions is coordinated by counterfeit councils. And there are some portals that are currently active, but many are being awakened and activated. And we need to wake up to this and we need to start functioning. And this is why what we've been doing in restoration government groups is looking at how we can stop these things, but how we can do it in a restorative way, not in a warfare way. Son, whenever the ages are in transition, there's also increased opposition activity. That's why we've established the Earth Shield. I began a specific constellational, began in a specific constellation that was activated in an expanded quantum moment to facilitate this process of restoration at that moment. And so I engaged with some of these gateways. And I engaged the light realm and I discerned the Father's heart and I brooded and I went through the process of energizing and resonating with the thoughts and intentions of the Father's heart for that dimension. And I began to see that dimension as he showed me. Once I became a vibrating sound and I engaged sort of as an oracle and the light started to activate, I was able to engage and overshadow some of those portals and the event horizon with love's light for restoration. Where there was only a minimal activity, some they're very much more formed activity and they need more than just one person, but I was able to do something at that moment. The hope of mercy that was released was able to penetrate the dimensions beyond before I moved on to the next constellation. Again, that's what I was releasing, hope for mercy, hope that would inspire. And I was directed by the Council of the Guardians, because that's what I was engaging with at the time. Each expanding moment was like months of intense activity. There were times when I had to re-energize the gateways within the core of my being before attempting another process. I mean, it was a pretty intense time, but I was able to do that in expanded moments, but it still, in a sense, took a toll. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing, but it was an intense period. Son, continue to dwell in the light of our presence. Call on the angelic orders to engage the council before attempting to stop the occupation of other portals. So there was some stuff that needed doing. So I called the 4 angels of transition to accompany me. Now, these are angels I've worked with for 12 years. Their transformation, winds of change, sound of many waters, refiner's fire. And I have a very deep relationship with them. So they came. The council was in session when I presented my mandate before them, but they seemed to be aware, as if I wasn't interrupting, so that it was okay. And there was some debating and strategy before finally the conclusion from the guardians was more guardians need to be created to protect the most vulnerable constellations. Now, immediately I was like, okay, who's going to do that? And then they just looked at me as if I knew what I was about to do, but I'd never created anything sentient like a guardian or anything else. So I just avoided their gaze and started looking down. But I was aware that their gaze didn't change. Then I remembered what happened in 2010 when I was in the realms of heaven for a consistent period of time. Jesus was talking to me, and we were sitting him down, and he had a piece of wood, and he was whittling this wood, and he formed a horse. And I was looking at him, I think, what are you doing? You know, and it's like, and he put the horse down and it ran off. And I was like, so surprised. And he said, well, basically nothing is dead here. Everything's living and everything loves to be creative in the process. So I'm thinking, oh, and then he invited me to create something. Now, this is 2010. So I'm green at this stuff. I am naive at this stuff. So I just thought about what I wanted to create and I pictured it in my mind, and I pictured a multicolored bird with a plume of multicolors, and then it appeared flying around us. And I was like, wow. And that bird is actually still flying around within the dimension of the garden of my heart because Jesus gave me permission for it to be there. So I shifted my focus again to the light realm because I thought, hey, this is going to be more complicated because it's like, what do I need to do? And actually, I need to make sure I have a mandate from the Father, not just a council edict that I'm uncomfortable with. So I engaged the Father. The concept had sort of stretched me a little bit. I was a little bit nervous about what am I supposed to do? And can I do it? So the Father said, son, you now dwell here. You dwell within the cradle of life. You know our heart. So the process of creating is no more complicated because you just know the sequence that light responds to. So he was a bit blasé about it. I thought, oh, okay. So I was aware the council was waiting. So I went back and, surrounded by the 4 angels that were with me, I pictured many guardians in my mind being formed, and they just appeared. Now, I was aware that there was a process taking place, but I was just doing the process and it happened. Okay. Now, that's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. I heard the Father speak in my mind, and I knew that there were limits to what I should do with my creative ability, and that others would also need to create. So I wasn't going to just go wild. Great, I can create anything. Because I was given an edict from the court and the council and from the Father. Son, only choose the realities you know are intentions and help to mobilize others to become creatively active. All of us can do these things. You know, I am a very special person in the heart of God, just like you. And I am no more special than you're special. We are all in the heart of God equally loved, accepted, and valued and special to him. We are the apple of his eye. We're the treasure of his heart. So I engaged the Guardians Council, and those guardians, fully newly created guardians, were there, and we assigned them to their constellation stations. And they went off and they started guarding some of the portals which were unguarded but are not yet activated. And now I am assuming they're not going to be activated. So somewhat bemused by the whole encounter, I just sort of left. Now the Father said to me, look, son, don't be overwhelmed by what you're being called to do. It is your destiny and that of all our children, all our sons, to be creatively responsible. There is so much more to come for all our children as they mature in sonship. Now, I do have some specific teaching about the creative realms, how to engage brooding, how to engage becoming a voice, a frequency, how to engage light within the Engaging God program. I haven't got time to do it in these sessions, but they are all there. The whole Engaging God program that we have, which is a subscription program of £12 a month or something, it's not expensive, is designed to bring people into sonship and equip them to be able to be governmental sons in the realms of heaven and to be in union with heart and mind and purpose with the Father. The whole program is just my experiences shared and activated so people can engage it. And if you've not seen it, check it out. You can get a 2-week free look at it. But I would recommend it if you're looking at how do I do this? Because it's easy for me to say, this is just what I did. But I've gone through years and years of preparation. And I believe that we who have gone this journey can accelerate that for others and activate people to do this in a more accelerated way. So right now, we've got some time because I've not taken as long as I normally do. So we've got some time. And so we'll do an activation and I will throw it open for a little bit of time, some questions. Again, I just want you to engage the Father and be willing to be absorbed into union with him, whatever that will mean for you and whatever you need to see, to experience right now on your journey. I want to encourage you to engage that. So just close your eyes. Begin to focus the intention and desire of your heart to engage in the light of the Father's presence. And just open the eyes of your heart and choose to come closer and closer and closer to him. As we draw to him, he draws to us, and we come together. And there's a coming together that I believe the Father wants to take us into, that you can look upon his face. You can then come closer and closer. So you're heart to heart. You're no longer able to see because you're so close, but you're now heart to heart. So you're embracing heart to heart. And now just come, let him draw you deeper and deeper into him. So get drawn into oneness, into union. Let him draw you deeper into his being, into his heart. Some of you are going to engage in his heart and you're going to feel emotions. Some of you are going to be drawn into his mind and you're going to feel illumination and revelation. Some of you are just going to get drawn deeper and deeper into his very being, into union, and you're going to experience unconditional love, limitless grace, triumphant mercy. You're going to feel joy unspeakable, peace beyond understanding, to bring you into a state of rest. So relax. Don't try to figure it out. Just relax. Be drawn into deeper oneness. And just go with whatever you're feeling and sensing. Just stay in that place of rest. Stay in that place of deep, deep, deep rest. Just let the frequencies of unconditional love cocoon you. Let the frequency engage you. This frequency of limitless grace, expanding your consciousness. triumphant mercy. They wash over you, surround you. Drawing you deeper into unconditional love. So just rest, rest. If you have been disturbed in your spirit, if the challenges to your mind has sort of created cognitive dissonance, is causing you to feel disturbed, just enter that place of rest. Let him draw you into a safe place where he can reveal truth to you. He can unveil things to you. He can reveal some of those mysteries, those things that are hidden to you. I'd encourage you, just give him permission to open up that realm of mystery, to open up the truth, the light of truth, to unveil and reveal any areas where you might have blockages, where you might have constructs in your mind, belief systems that are limiting you, restricting you, believing the truth, B, believing who you really are, and believing in the full scope of restoration. So any blockages, any hindrances, I just encourage you, ask him to reveal them and to remove them in love. Let his love, let his limitless grace, let his triumphant mercy overwhelm. He has deep compassion for you. Any areas of blockage, let his compassion just wash those blockages away. Let it be waves and waves of emotion, waves and waves of truth, waves and waves of love. Let them flow over you, in you, through you, going through the caverns of your consciousness, deconstructing some of the pillars of your belief, those pillars which are framed outside of God's kingdom, that your mind can be renewed, that you will have a rewiring of your consciousness to truth. Okay, feel free to stay in that place if you just want to continue in that place of rest, just going deeper into it. For those who've got any questions you might want to ask, feel free to do that. Obviously, I want to focus on questions that are really about this session. Tonight, when all four of us are there, we will answer questions relating to the general things that may have come out through the whole conference. And I'm very happy to answer questions relating when we're all able to interact, because at the moment, I don't want to answer questions relating to someone else's sessions. I want to answer questions relating to my session, because basically that the other people aren't available to interact. So please, anyone's got any questions, you can stick your hand up if you'd like. Anybody? Nope. Okay, that's all right. If no one's got any questions, yeah, okay. Florian, you've got your hand there.
Mike?
Yep.
Yeah,
carry on.
Very interested in what's going on there in this spiritual realm. I think for me, because I'm more from mind, my challenge is like, I want like to connect it a bit to what's going on around me. And do you sometimes like see like when there is something shifting in the spiritual realm, that things in the reality realm are changing too?
Yeah, absolutely. In a sense, if it doesn't make a difference to our lives, then ultimately we've got to question, well, what effect is it having? Now, that doesn't mean that all things are obvious to everybody. You have to sometimes look with the eyes of the spirit to begin to discern the changes and things that are taking place. A lot of what, engaging the earth shield, engaging these, I'm really engaging with the planet a lot, with the core of the earth, with the sentience of the earth. And, and I am beginning to see things. Some of the things are things that were going to happen have not happened. Now, that's obviously quite difficult to prove, obviously. When you're looking at, stopping Yellowstone Park blowing up, or if it doesn't blow up, or when the eruption doesn't take place, then, you're not going to be able to say, well, this is in evidence, because you're at sort of almost sort of saying from something that didn't happen. But there are a lot of things that aren't going to happen because we're legislating to ensure they're not going to happen. But I do believe there is an awakening to love and consciousness. And I am seeing that. I think there's an awakening away from the financial control systems of GDP and corporations, and people are beginning to awaken. And I think some of the people are beginning to react to that, they are beginning to challenge it. And I think we're starting to see people are beginning to say, I'm not prepared to accept this state any longer. So you're getting protest. Now, I know those protests can be hijacked and they can create problems, but I think protest is a sign that people are beginning to awaken. There are nations who are beginning to awaken to well-being. There's the Well-Being Alliance of 4 or 5 nations at the moment who are making an edict that they're going to put the well-being of their citizens above the economy, because actually the economy of well-being is what it is all about, Jubilee. It's not about the commodification of everything. Now, I think Jonathan talked about JFK and his assassination. Actually, when Robert Kennedy was running or going to run for president, he actually again made a statement, and you can find it on YouTube. You can find on the Wellbeing Economy website, that he stated that, again, GDP was bringing the nation and the people of the nation into bondage, and he wanted to do something about it. And he talked about a well-being economy, changing from a nation that valued the happiness of his citizens rather than their wealth, in physical wealth. Now, I know wealth obviously is not just talking about money, and real wealth is actually well-being when we're living in a state of well-being mentally, physically. Now, he got assassinated, and actually, if you look at the 60s onwards, stress has probably become one of the biggest causes of sickness the world knows. And stress is behind so much sickness because people are on the treadmill of making money for the financial systems, or to try and keep themselves up with the Joneses and try and make themselves happy materially, and being stressed to do that, when actually God wants us to rest in seeking first the kingdom so that he can add everything we need. And I do believe we're seeing evidence of that. And there's lots of different evidences. Things are starting to be unveiled that have been hidden for years. Free energy, for one. Definitely free energy systems, which have been suppressed by the oil industry and the financial industry. Financial systems are coming to light. I had two friends who developed an engine that could run on water or hydrogen produced from water, and a home boiler system that could run on the same, and they could never bring it to market. Whatever they tried, they were thwarted. They just could not bring it to market. And in the end, they basically just had to use it for their own use. Now there's infinity energy. There's perpetual energy machines being developed that have a net energy that is free and continues to just be produced. These things are starting to take place. And I believe some of those things are some of the signs that we are awakening, and the systems that are keeping things into the status quo of control are beginning to be shaken. And I believe that every man-made system that's designed to create a false economic system or governmental system is being shaken, and what will be left is the kingdom of God, which will fill the earth as we begin to release it and establish it. So I do see things. That doesn't mean that everything around my life is perfect, and there are situations that I'm going through that are far from perfect, but I am still in a place of peace in the midst of those situations. And although some situations you can't just change, you can live within the eye of the storm. When Jesus was on the boat, and all his disciples were panicking because the storm came and they thought they were all going to die, Jesus was asleep. He was living in the eye of the storm because he'd already said that they were going to over the other side. So he woke up and he just said, "Peace, be still," and they were immediately on the other side. So all of us need to learn to live in rest and peace in the eye of the storms, because there may be some storms, global storms, because when things get shaken, it feels like there's a storm. I mean, Jonathan was talking about the collapse of the financial systems. If they totally collapse right now today, and there was no way of accessing any money that you had electronically stored, what would you do? So we've got to be ready for that. I don't want the financial system to collapse quite today, because most people would be caught unawares and probably would struggle. So we've got to develop places on earth as it is in heaven that live under the economy of heaven, and therefore places that can create and establish and call things into being that will enable us to live differently, off the grid, if you like. Now, I'm not a prepper and I'm not into all that stuff. I think that stuff is just, mixed up with a whole lot of other fear-inducing stuff about we're going to be rescued, so we better keep ourselves safe. And all the thing of rising up to take arms, all of that stuff is totally contradictory to the very character and nature of Jesus being the Prince of Peace. So I'm not advocating anything like that, but I do believe we need to learn to be ready. And I think the shakings are going to take place that may well spur us into action to get ready for what's coming so that we live on a different level and different scale and can demonstrate something different. So I do believe, yes, definitely, where we can see evidence of it. And if you talk to Nancy about the evidence of what she is engaging in her global ascension network and the things that are happening in some of the things she's doing, she'll be able to give you a lot of probably examples if she's allowed to. I'm not sure whether she is, but she's, you know, there are amazing things happening. You know, there's a huge awakening taking place, you know, in lots of different areas, which I think is part of the evidence of what we're doing governmentally. Now, you could look globally and you could get very disappointed that everything's not as it should be, but things are better than what they were. You know, we started this off with 12 people and now we've got 2.38 billion people who are ready to be activated and come into sonship. You know, it's like 100 years ago, children were working down mines and going up chimneys. Now they're in school, you know, so things are changing. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we need to address within the world. And I do believe part of the Earth Shield is to help us address some of the things which are contradictory to what we know God's kingdom to be. So definitely believe that is true. Okay, anyone else got anything they want to ask?
Yes, Mike, hand is up. My name is Patience.
Okay, I can see a few hands up there. Okay, go for it.
Is it me, Patience?
Let me see. Yeah, okay, go for it, Patience, and then I think Henny, you're the one I can see next. I can just see. Yeah, okay, go for it, Patience.
Okay, my question is, when you all legislate in the Earth Shield, is there a time when you legislate concerning individual countries and things happening in geopolitical areas? Do you get to that granular level, or is it just a shield protecting the planet, as it were?
It is a shield protecting the planet, but it has a legislative governmental mandate. Now that's for restoration government. Therefore, it is about the areas of restoration that we're mandated to deal with. Now, yes, we definitely engage in nations. We engage in the earth. We engage in the core of the earth. We engage with the crust of the earth. We engage with pressure points in the earth where there's potential things that could erupt and happen. So it is also very practical, and that we're looking to engage to deal with trauma in the earth, the memory of trauma, the memory of devastation, so that the earth itself comes to a place of peace and rest, which is quite specific. Now, what we've got to be careful that we do in this is that we do have a mandate, that we don't just get on hobby horses of personal missions. And some people have personal missions and they get caught up in stuff, which personally is not my mission. So there has to be a degree of union where you say, are we in agreement that this is what we feel the Father's saying? Because I don't want to get drawn into a whole lot of conspiracy stuff and all sorts of stuff, which will dilute what we're doing. Other groups may well have mandates to deal with other things. I think we have a mandate for certain things that may increase and develop. I'm not saying this won't grow and include other things, but we are looking at some of the things behind trafficking, some of the things about dimensional trafficking. I mean, we are looking at some stuff, you know, in this. But some of it, I don't want to go into details because some of that we've done privately, and I wouldn't want to sort of share what other people have done. You know, I'm happy to share what I've done, but I don't feel free necessarily to share what anyone else has done. That'd be up to them if they wanted to do that. But definitely, this is a very practical, governmental, legislative thing, as well as we are here to provide a shield of light that keeps out external interference and then creates an atmosphere where things can begin to take place on the earth. And, you know, we started off in the sort of this global pandemic, looking at, well, what do we feel about what's going on? And all of us felt actually God was at work within this to bring about a reset of values, a reset of things. Now, I'm not saying that other forces aren't also trying to be at work in it in a negative sense, but I believe God will bring good out of everything if we embrace him for that good and pursue the good and don't get too caught up in fear. And well, don't ever get caught up in fear. Perfect love casts out fear. And we want the earth shield to be a fear-free zone. And some people's legislation actually is coming out of their fear. And that's never a good motive for legislating. We need to motivate out of the intention of the Father's heart in love, which will cast out all fear. And therefore, sometimes I pick up from people and I'm sensing there's a fear behind what you're saying here. We want to change this because of fear of this happening or that happening. And I think that's not really a good motive for engaging, but we want to deal with the fear that's in the world. So we want to release peace. You know, as a ministry, we've been releasing waves of love to go round the world for the last 12 months or more, to reveal, to let waves of love come around. Because at the beginning of this pandemic, fear was making it worse and worse and worse. Because fear is a negative atmosphere that allows negative things to take place. So we started to legislate for a calming down of that fear. And then all things start to throw up around, you know, Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff started to come up. And then that started to create anger. And then people started to be angry with each other. So we had to legislate for a calming down and a peace to come onto that. So it has been practical. And I think the state of the world right now is much better than it was in the midst of all that fear and anger. I'm not saying that it's sorted out, because of course it isn't, but we are taking responsibility for what we can do to see peace. You know, I don't want a violent overflow and revelation of the systems that are controlling the world. I don't want a vacuum to be created that is going to bring anarchy. I want to see a transition. See, when the end of the old age happened in AD 70, there was a transition period. When you move in the cosmos between one period and another into the next age of Aquarius, whatever, then there's a transition. And then you start to see things happen in the transition. And I think we're starting to see those things. But you have to guard the transition, because the transition can be used by negative forces as well as positive forces if you're not guarding it. And I think that's what the shield is somewhat about, although other people may have quite a lot of different views on that. Okay, who was going to go next? I don't think you've got your hand up anymore. Nope. Okay, well, who else got their hand up there?
Henny's been waving her hand for a long time. Hey, Henny.
Okay, yes, you disappeared off my thing. So yeah, okay, go for it.
Thank you so much. I've been part of your Engaging God program for a while, and it took me a very long time to get through just preparation for base camp, but definitely opened my senses to be more alert how God speaks. And I had this very strange impression that the Lord asked me to love time. And I remember I freaked out. Is there such a thing that loving time? And I kind of sat with it. I don't have open visions. I'm not there yet. I'm on a journey with him. It's beautiful, it's exciting. But I feel this is a safe place to ask this. I felt that there are people who are called to govern time, and I didn't really understand the objective until yesterday. Lindy was talking about immortality, and something just stirred in me, and I saw these things kind of coming together, that governing time into eternity. And my question is that, is there such a thing as governing time? If we govern, it has to be with love. I understand that, but can we love something that we see that it's a stretchy fabric? And when I hear any of you talking about time, it seems like that all of us really should, are going to learn to stretch that fabric and to bend it and to construct it. So is there really such a thing as governing time? Or yeah, that's it.
Definitely. Absolutely, definitely. Time is a being. So I'm going to share that in my last session tomorrow about the engagements that we've recently had with time as a being. And we're going to engage that being, and we're going to disconnect and be untangled from time in a wrong sense and reconnect to time in the right sense. So absolutely, there's a sense where time is there to serve us and in relationship with us, cooperate with us for the facilitation of God's plans and purposes. So absolutely, we need to learn to govern, but not in a disrespectful way, but well, we're just going to control time. It's not about controlling time. It's about cooperating and working with time. So yeah, absolutely. You're definitely on the right path. You'll probably find tomorrow's session interesting around those areas, and we will finish with an activation where we're going to look to engage time and look to engage it to connect correctly and deal with those areas where we've wrongly been connected to time. Because the whole thing of immortality is because people have been connected to time and aging. Like seconds, minutes, they pass and we age. And if you follow that consequently, then your body is aging and therefore your cells are not communicating anymore properly. And then ultimately you're going to die. Well, that's not God's intention. And therefore we do need to connect with time in the right way to be able to do that. And that's been very helpful also engaging other beings, because time enables us to connect with who they were and what God's intention was for them. And that's been another function of that. But I will share that more tomorrow in the session tomorrow. Okay, I need to leave it there. We are going to now take a break until 6 o'clock, in which we're going to hear from the lovely Nancy, who is going to share more wonderful things and stir us and encourage us, I'm sure. So let's take a break now, and we'll come back at